Hi there, and welcome back to Haunting Vales. Tonight, we journey to the sun-drenched shores of the French Riviera, a place of glamour, wealth, and sparkling seas. But behind the elegance lies a story of deception, betrayal, and a murder that only the brilliant mind of Hercule Poirot could untangle. This is Death on the Riviera, a Hercule Poirot mystery. If you enjoy unraveling mysteries with us, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Now, let's dive in. Chapter 1. A Sea Breeze and a Shadow. The Côte d'Azur in springtime was a place where time itself seemed to bask lazily beneath the Mediterranean sun. Waves shimmered against the pale rocks, gulls wheeled languidly above the harbor, and the streets were a riot of color. Market stalls heavy with flowers, shutters painted in fading pastel hues, parasols shading the wealthy visitors who came from every corner of Europe to breathe the Riviera air. The year was 1936, and nowhere else did elegance and idleness entwine so thoroughly. From the terrace of the Hotel du Cap, Hercule Poirot surveyed the scene with an expression of meticulous contentment. He was a small man, neat to the point of fussiness, his white suit perfectly pressed, his shoes gleaming, his mustaches resplendent. Beside him sat Inspector Japp of Scotland Yard, incongruously dressed in a light summer jacket that seemed ill at ease on his broad figure. He sipped lemonade, grumbling amiably. "Mark my words, Poirot," Japp declared, squinting toward the promenade. "You can dress a copper up in Riviera linen, but he's still a copper underneath. And I tell you this, I'd rather be chasing pickpockets in London than sweltering in all this sunshine. I don't trust a holiday, never did. It's unnatural for a man in my line of work to sit idle." Poirot smiled indulgently. "And yet, mon ami, you are here. You're not in the fog of London, chasing, as you say, pickpockets. You are on the Riviera, where the sea is like sapphire and the women like the roses of Grasse. You should learn to appreciate it." "I'd appreciate a pint of bitter and a seat in a pub without palm trees," Japp retorted. Then, softening, he added, "Still, I can't deny it's a sight. You got a nose for these places, Poirot. Always where the money is, eh? And where there's money, there's trouble." "Ah," Poirot inclined his head with satisfaction. "You touch upon the truth. Where the wealthy gather, where they think only of pleasure, there crime lurks. Greed, envy, jealousy, revenge, these things flourish as readily under the sun as in the fog." As though fate had heard, a stir broke out near the marble-pillared entrance to the hotel. A gentleman of distinguished appearance staggered across the threshold, his face ashen beneath its Riviera tan. His hand clawed at his chest. For a moment he swayed, then collapsed heavily to the floor. "Accueil Joseph, un médecin. Vite! A doctor!" Guests crowded forward in alarm. Poirot and Japp were among the first to reach the fallen man. He was perhaps in his late 50s, broad-shouldered, with thick gray hair, now disordered. His tailored suit bespoke wealth. His heavy gold watch, lying broken where it had slipped from his wrist, confirmed it. A young woman rushed through the gathering throng. She was tall, fair-haired, with a striking figure and the unmistakable bearing of the well-bred English. "Papa!" she cried, kneeling beside him. "Oh, Papa, what's happened?" A waiter pressed a glass of water into her hand, but the man on the floor gave no response. Poirot bent close, his fingers finding the pulse at the neck. He shook his head gravely. "It is finished." The young woman's cry was sharp and heart-rending. Japp muttered, "Heart attack, poor devil." But Poirot, though he said nothing, allowed his eyes to rove with keen precision. The glass, overturned upon the tiles, bore the faintest trace of lipstick. The man's lips themselves held the barest suggestion of a froth. And, though very faint, the air carried a bitter almond note. Poirot's little gray cells stirred. Two more figures arrived in quick succession. One was a man of middle years, distinguished, his black hair graying at the temples. His clothes were sober, but of excellent cut. His expression, as he looked down at the body, was one of contained shock. "Good Lord, Charles Cavendish dead?" The young woman lifted tearful eyes. "Mr. Allardyce, it was so sudden." We were just at luncheon, and Papa said he would fetch something from the writing room. He seemed perfectly well. Poirot studied her closely. She was deeply distressed, but not incoherent. There was strength in her carriage, even in grief. The second newcomer was a lady, elegantly dressed in cream and pearls, her dark eyes sharp with curiosity rather than sorrow. "How dreadful," she murmured. "Dear of all places. Poor Charles." But then, his heart was never strong. She turned to the daughter. "My dear Sylvia, you must be brave." Sylvia Cavendish shuddered, her hand pressing against her face. "Best fetch the local doctor," Japp suggested gruffly. "And someone inform the police. Deaths like this, well, they'll want a word." The woman in pearls gave him a cool glance. "Surely, Inspector, you can see it was natural." Charles was not a young man. The Riviera air is not kind to those with weak constitutions. Japp stiffened. "And how would you know I was an inspector, madam?" She smiled faintly. "One notices things. You have the look of the English police, even in linen." Poirot intervened smoothly. "Permit me to introduce myself. Hercule Poirot, and my colleague from London, Inspector Japp. Might we inquire?" The lady inclined her head. "Countess Vera Markov. I was a friend of Mr. Cavendish. A very dear friend." Poirot's eyes flickered, but he said nothing. Instead, he turned once more to the scene. The broken watch, the overturned glass, the faint froth upon the lips. He touched Sylvia Cavendish's hand gently. "Mademoiselle, I grieve for your loss. But I beg you, answer me one question. Did your father complain of illness? Any pain? Any distress before this moment?" "No, monsieur. None at all." Poirot straightened. "Then perhaps, Inspector Japp, we do not close our minds too swiftly. It may be, yes, a natural death, but it may also be otherwise." The sea breeze stirred the palms outside, and in that bright hall of marble and light, a shadow had fallen. Chapter 2. The Masquerade of Motives. The Hotel Azure, a grand structure of whitewashed stone overlooking the dazzling Mediterranean, seemed the very picture of leisure. Bougainvillea trailed across balconies, the scent of salt and lavender drifted on the breeze, and the great glass-domed lobby, the guests floated about in a parade of elegance. Yet, beneath this perfection, Hercule Poirot perceived something else, an undercurrent of unease, as though a discordant note had been struck in the Riviera Symphony. Poirot, immaculately dressed in a cream linen suit with a perfectly folded pocket square, observed the hotel's patrons from a wicker chair near the reception desk. His gaze rested briefly upon each face, cataloging them with the precision of a jeweler inspecting stones. He did not yet know which would prove paste and which diamond, but already he sensed the pattern of a mystery waiting to be unveiled. Miss Amy Whitfield, the efficient English secretary, sat at a writing desk, her pen scratching briskly across postcards. Her expression, though polite, was tinged with strain, a woman accustomed to order, unsettled perhaps by something beyond her control. Not far from her, a tall gentleman with sun-browned skin leaned casually against the bar. Captain Henry Ransom, a retired officer whose charm was as smooth as his tailored blazer. Yet Poirot noted the faint stiffness in his gait, the way his eyes darted restlessly to the entrance. A soldier's nerves, perhaps, or a conscience that pricked him still. At a window overlooking the sea stood the enigmatic Madame Lefebvre, draped in silk the color of midnight. A widow of considerable fortune, she carried herself with theatrical poise, yet her fingers worried at the edge of her shawl as if to betray some inner agitation. Guests whispered that her husband's death the year before had left her wealthy, yes, but also secretive and withdrawn. Nearby, a young couple provided contrast to this air of melancholy. Charles and Evelyn Montclair, newly married, seemed to epitomize gaiety. She laughed easily, tossing her golden hair back as though life were but a string of dances. He, dashing and handsome, smiled with devotion. But Poirot, ever suspicious of appearances, caught the flicker of irritation in Charles's face when Evelyn's attention strayed toward another guest, a suave Italian art dealer named Signor Bellini, who had recently taken up residence at the hotel. Signor Bellini, with his waxed mustache and careful attire, was a man of many compliments and few admissions. His business, he declared, was the trade of fine art, but Poirot wondered at the quiet meetings Bellini arranged in shadowed corners, and the way small parcels seemed to change hands when no one was supposed to be watching. Poirot adjusted his cuffs. "Mon ami Hastings," he murmured, though, of course, Hastings was not present. The phrase was habit. How swiftly beneath the glamour does the human heart reveal its discontents. The first true disturbance came with the arrival of a police inspector, M. Fournier, from Nice. He entered with little ceremony, his hat tucked under his arm, his eyes sharp. He saw Poirot immediately. "Monsieur Poirot, I trust one do not intrude," Fournier said in low tones. "But I thought it best we speak. There have been forgeries in circulation, artworks, jewelry, documents, finding their way to collectors along the coast. We suspect an international ring, clever and elusive. And our informant swears one of the key figures is among the guests of this very hotel." Poirot inclined his head gravely. "Ah, so it is not merely the sunshine and the sea that bring intrigue to the Riviera. You see, Inspector, it is as I said, beneath the surface the shadows lurk." As evening descended, the hotel prepared for its grand masquerade ball, a tradition of the season. Silk masks, feathers, and gilded costumes transformed the guests into a living carnival. Music drifted from the ballroom, violins swelling as couples danced beneath chandeliers. Yet even in this splendor, Poirot's sharp eyes caught the play of secrets. Captain Ransom lingered at the edge of the dance floor, nursing a glass of whiskey, his gaze fixed upon Madame Lefebvre in a manner that suggested more than casual admiration. Evelyn Montclair, her face half hidden behind a Venetian mask, danced with Signor Bellini, too closely, Poirot thought, for her husband's comfort. Miss Whitfield, in modest attire, slipped from the room more than once, returning with an alibi of fresh air, though her pale cheeks suggested another errand entirely. And Madame Lefebvre herself, when a masked partner led her briefly to the terrace, Poirot noted the subtle exchange of a folded paper between gloved hands. By midnight, a tension hummed through the glittering ballroom, perceptible only to the most acute of observers. And when the clock struck 12, that tension broke, not with fireworks, but with a scream. From the direction of the hotel's private garden came the cry, sharp and sudden, slicing through the music. Guests froze. The orchestra faltered. Poirot, ever precise, was already moving, his small figure slipping deftly through the crowd. There, beneath the moonlight and shadows of cypress trees, a body lay sprawled upon the gravel path. A mask torn away, a silken gown darkened with spreading crimson. The figure was unmistakable, Madame Lefebvre. Poirot knelt, his face grave. "So," he murmured softly, "the masquerade is ended, and now begins the unmasking of truth." Chapter 3: Secrets in the Moonlight. The Riviera moon cast its pale silver light upon the gardens of the Hotel Azure, bathing the tragic scene in eerie serenity. The laughter and music of the ballroom had ceased, replaced now by gasps, whispers, and the shuffle of feet as curious guests pressed forward. Madame Lefebvre's still figure lay beneath the cypress trees, her jeweled mask discarded, her silken gown sodden with blood. A dagger of ornate design protruded from her chest, the metal glinting with the cold indifference of death. Hercule Poirot, crouched beside the body, adjusted his immaculate cuffs and bent lower, his sharp eyes noting the details with unfailing precision. The angle of the wound, the torn edge of lace, the faint imprint of a shoe in the gravel not far from the body. These were not mere coincidences to be dismissed, but the first whispers of truth, murmuring only to those who listen carefully. "Messieurs, madame, I must beg you to step back," Poirot commanded, his voice calm but carrying authority. "The dead, she deserves respect, and the living, they must not disturb the little signs, the clues that may speak if only they are not silenced." Murmurs rippled through the gathering crowd. Captain Ransom pushed forward, his face pale beneath his tan, his jaw set with soldierly resolve. Good God, Poirot. Madame Lefebvre murdered? Here, in the gardens of the hotel? This is madness. Poirot's gaze flicked to the man's trembling hand, clutching his whiskey glass as though it were an anchor. Oui, Captain. Madness or calculation. We shall see which. Inspector Fournier, summoned swiftly from the ballroom, arrived breathless, his uniformed men dispersing the guests with stern insistence. No one is to leave the premises, Fournier announced. The murderer is among us tonight. A ripple of unease spread like a shadow. Poirot noted the shifting glances, the tightened lips, the sudden silence of those who had moments before been laughing freely. A ballroom of merriment had transformed into a prison of suspicion. Poirot leaned closer to the body, murmuring softly, "A dagger most curious, not a weapon of convenience. No, no, this is an object carried for a purpose." He delicately examined the hilt, carved with an intricate pattern of vines and small fleur-de-lis. A family crest, perhaps, or an antiquity purchased at no small cost. Whoever struck this blow did not pluck the weapon from chance. They brought it with intent. From behind, a stifled sob broke the silence. Evelyn Montclair, her golden mask now lifted from her tear-streaked face, clung to her husband's arm. Charles Montclair, however, appeared less shaken than his bride, his jaw tight, his eyes darting not at the body but across the assembled faces. Poirot rose. Madame Lefebvre is dead. That much is clear. But the why, the how, the who? These we must discover. Inspector Fournier, if you permit, I will assist in the inquiry. My little gray cells, they are at your disposal. Fournier, though a man of pride, gave a nod of deference. Monsieur Poirot, your reputation precedes you. I would be a fool to decline. So began the long night of inquiry. The guests, shaken and restless, were gathered once more within the ballroom, though the gaiety had drained away, leaving only the pale echo of music and the rustle of uneasy garments. Poirot, standing beneath the glittering chandelier, regarded them all as an actor might study a stage before the performance begins. Mesdames et messieurs, he began with measured poise, we must speak one by one. Each of you has seen something, knows something, perhaps without realizing its importance. And until the truth is laid bare, we cannot allow suspicion to rest unjustly. I ask only for honesty. Concealment, however small, can prove fatal in more ways than one. The first to be called was Miss Amy Whitfield. The English secretary came forward with brisk steps, though her clasped hands betrayed her tension. You were absent from the ballroom for a time this evening, mademoiselle, Poirot observed. Several times, in fact. Miss Whitfield flushed. Yes, I stepped out for air. The crowd, the music, it was overwhelming. Poirot's eyes narrowed slightly. And you were not alone? She hesitated, then shook her head. No, monsieur. I was quite alone. And yet your cheeks, when you returned, they were flushed not from the cool night air, but from haste. You ran, did you not? Tell me why. Her lips parted, then closed. After a moment, she replied with forced composure. I assure you, Monsieur Poirot, I ran for no reason but my own restlessness. I'm not accustomed to such gaiety. If you doubt me, then I cannot help it. Poirot bowed slightly. We shall see, mademoiselle. Sometimes what one does not say is as eloquent as what one does. Next came Captain Henry Ransom. His tall frame filled the space, his military bearing intact, though his eyes betrayed the toll of drink and unease. You admired Madame Lefebvre, Poirot said quietly, perhaps more than was prudent. Ransom's jaw tightened. I respected her. She was a remarkable woman. But if you're implying he broke off, swallowing hard. She had enemies, Poirot. She was wealthy, independent, and not afraid to use her influence. Someone resented that. But not I. Poirot tilted his head. And yet, mon capitaine, you were seen watching her with intensity tonight. Was it concern, jealousy, or something else? The soldier's face hardened. You read too much into a look. I've nothing to hide. Poirot let the remark pass, though his little gray cells filed it carefully away. The Montclairs followed. Evelyn trembled, her tears genuine, while Charles stood stiffly, answering with clipped words. Poirot noted the subtle shift between them, the distance of a quarrel masked by public duty. "Madame Montclair, you danced with Signor Bellini this evening," Poirot remarked. Evelyn flushed. "Yes, monsieur. It was harmless. A dance only. And yet your husband, he did not approve?" Charles interjected sharply. "I trust my wife. What you imply is insulting, Poirot." Poirot's eyes lingered on the man, reading the brutal pride beneath his words. "Then perhaps it is Signor Bellini himself who must enlighten us." The Italian art dealer stepped forward, his smile faint, his manner suave. "Monsieur Poirot, I am shocked as all of you. A terrible crime, indeed. But I assure you, I am innocent of it. I danced. I laughed. I admired Madame Lefebvre as a patron of beauty. But murder? That is not my trade." Poirot's gaze sharpened. "And yet your trade is shadowed, Seigneur. You deal in art, yes, but also in items less legitimate, perhaps. You are known for your connections, for the movement of goods whose origins are, how shall we say, delicate." Bellini's smile flickered, then returned, smoother than before. "Rumors, monsieur. Always rumors. But if you suspect me, then prove it. Until then, I remain but a guest at this fine hotel." Poirot bowed slightly, his mind already busy. At last, Poirot called upon the servants. The maid who had served champagne, the porter who had carried luggage, the concierge who saw all yet spoke little. Each offered fragments. Madame Lefebvre's nervousness of late, the parcels delivered in secrecy, the phone calls taken in hushed tones. When a final account had been given, Poirot folded his hands. His voice, though calm, carried weight. "We have a fragments, M.E.S. Amos. The dagger of curious design, the secret meetings, the tensions among you all. Already, a picture begins to form. The masquerade ball, it is symbolic, is it not? Each of you wears a mask, whether of silk or of deception. But masks they slip, and beneath, the truth waits." The clock struck 3. The Riviera night was deep, the sea whispering against the shore. The guests, weary yet restless, were dismissed to their rooms under guard, though few would sleep. Poirot lingered in the garden once more, staring at the place where Madame Lefebvre had fallen. The moonlight gleamed upon the blood-stained gravel, and a faint perfume of roses mingled with the metallic tang of death. Poirot spoke softly, almost to himself. "Yes, the murderer is clever, but already they have made their first mistake. Soon, with the aid of my little gray cells, the masquerade will end." Chapter 4. The Web Tightens. Morning broke upon the hotel azure with deceptive beauty. The Mediterranean stretched before it, calm and glimmering as though nothing had disturbed the night. Yet within the hotel, the atmosphere was taut, each guest moving with the self-conscious caution of an actor suddenly aware of an unseen audience. Death had left its imprint, and suspicion, like a salt wind, corroded every interaction. Hercule Poirot descended to the breakfast salon at precisely 8 o'clock, his attire immaculate in pale gray, a fresh boutonniere of white carnation at his lapel. He surveyed the room with quiet satisfaction. All the suspects had gathered, though their countenances varied. Some wore masks of indifference, others of nervous chatter, and still others kept their silence, as though words themselves might betray them. Poirot seated himself deliberately at a small corner table, his eyes keenly watchful. The ritual of breakfast, porcelain cups, silver spoons, the fragrance of coffee mingling with warm croissants, was to him a theater where the players revealed their characters most honestly. It was Charles Montclair who first betrayed himself. He buttered his toast with exaggerated precision, his movements sharp, his gaze ever so often shifting to his wife. Evelyn, pale and wan, toyed with her spoon, scarcely tasting her food. Between them stretched the silence of unspoken discord, a gulf more eloquent than quarrels. Captain Ransom, meanwhile, devoured his eggs with military efficiency, yet each clang of fork upon plate betrayed a tension he could not wholly disguise. Signor Bellini, immaculate as ever, sipped his coffee with languid grace. though his eyes roved ceaselessly, taking note of who whispered with whom. Miss Whitfield, in her modest attire, sat alone, her face set in grim lines, her letters spread upon the table, though her pen remained motionless. Inspector Fournier entered briskly, nodding curtly to Poirot. Bon matin, monsieur. We are prepared to begin the formal questioning. Poirot rose. Indeed, Inspector, and you will permit me, I hope, to conduct these conversations in my own fashion. It is not only what is said, but how it is said, that reveals the truth. The questioning began in the private drawing room, its tall windows opening to a view of the dazzling sea. One by one, the suspects were called. Poirot, with his hands folded neatly before him, listened, interrupted with precision, and noted each hesitation, each too careful phrase. Miss Whitfield was first. She sat stiffly, her knuckles white around her handbag. Mademoiselle, Poirot said gently, you left the ballroom last night, several times. We must know why. Her eyes flickered. I told you, monsieur, I required air. Crowds, noise, they overwhelm me. Ah, yes. Yet the garden is large. Did you not see Madame Lefebvre there? No, monsieur. Her denial came swiftly, perhaps too swiftly. Poirot leaned forward. And yet a maid recalls seeing you by the telephone booth, speaking in hushed tones. To whom did you speak? A pause, then a flustered, it was personal business. Nothing to do with this horror. Personal business in the midst of a ball? How curious. But we will return to that later. Next came Captain Ransom. He stood rigid, his military bearing intact, yet his eyes betrayed unease. Captain, Poirot began, you admired Madame Lefebvre. More than admired, perhaps. Ransom's jaw tightened. I respected her. She was a woman of intelligence and, yes, charm. But my admiration was not criminal. And yet, you quarreled with her but a week ago, did you not? Witnesses heard raised voices upon the terrace. His face darkened. A misunderstanding. She had information that concerned me. It was not for others to hear. Poirot's eyebrows lifted. Information, Captain? Of what kind? That is my affair. His voice was curt, defensive. Poirot made a delicate gesture with his hands. As you wish. But secrets, Captain, they weigh heavily. And sometimes they drive men to desperate actions. Charles and Evelyn Montclair entered together. The contrast between them was striking. Evelyn trembling, Charles defiant. Poirot regarded them with polite gravity. Monsieur Montclair, your wife danced with Signor Bellini last night. It displeased you, n'est-ce pas? Charles stiffened. I'm not a jealous schoolboy, Poirot. I trust Evelyn. But your face betrayed anger, and anger, it is a seed that may sprout quickly. Evelyn interjected, her voice quivering. Monsieur Poirot, it was nothing. A dance only. But Charles and I, we have been under strain. Financial matters, you understand. Madame Lefebvre, she had offered us assistance. Poirot's little eyes gleamed. Assistance? In what form? A loan, Evelyn whispered. She was kind. Too kind. Charles cut in sharply. That is enough, Evelyn. Poirot nodded slowly. Ah, money. Always it lurks behind the curtain of crime. We shall not forget this. Signor Bellini followed. His manner was smooth, his tone unctuous. Monsieur Poirot, this crime, it is most tragic. But I'm a businessman. I deal in art, in beauty, not in blood. Poirot's gaze was sharp. And yet, Signor, your dealings are not always legitimate. The police suspect forgeries, smuggling. Madame Lefebvre, was she not your patroness? Or perhaps your partner? Bellini's smile faltered. We had an arrangement, yes, but nothing criminal. And yet last night, you danced with her, you whispered in her ear. And then, she's found dead. Bellini spread his hands. A coincidence, nothing more. My conscience is clear. Poirot's little gray cells, however, were far from satisfied. When the questioning concluded, Poirot returned to the garden, alone save for Inspector Fournier. The Riviera sun now illuminated the gravel path where Madame Lefebvre had fallen. Poirot knelt once more, tracing the faint outline of a footprint near the roses. Observe, Inspector, Poirot murmured. A print too small for a man, too broad for a child. A woman's shoe, perhaps. And the earth, see, it is scuffed as though there was a struggle. Madame Lefebvre did not die without resistance. Fournier frowned. Then one of the women, Miss Whitfield, Madame Montclair, Poirot raised a finger. Patience, mon ami, is not so simple. A man may wear a woman's shoe. A woman may wield a man's dagger. The truth, it hides beneath layers. But already, the threads begin to weave. That afternoon, Poirot convened the suspects once more, this time in the great salon overlooking the sea. The air was heavy with tension, the scent of salt mingling with unease. Poirot stood at the center, his small figure commanding the space. Mesdames et messieurs, he said softly, we are no longer at a masquerade ball, yet still you wear your masks. But they slip, oh yes. Already, the web tightens. And soon, one among you will find it is too tight to escape. The silence that followed was heavy, charged, as though the very walls of the Hotel Azure held their breath. Outside, the sea glimmered in indifferent beauty, while within, the net of suspicion closed ever tighter. Poirot folded his hands. It is nearly time, Mies Amos. The truth, she prepares to reveal herself. But before she does, let us wait. For the murderer, already, has grown afraid. Chapter 5, The Garden of Truth. The salon of the Hotel Azure had been transformed into a courtroom. The sun had long dipped below the horizon, leaving the windows glazed with the indigo hues of evening. Lamps glowed softly, casting long shadows across the parquet floor. The sea beyond whispered against the shore, indifferent to the storm that brewed within. Inspector Fournier stood near the door with his men, grim and ready. One by one, the guests were summoned and seated. Miss Amy Whitfield, prim and pale, her hands clenched at her lap. Captain Henry Ransom, stiff with defiance, his jaw set. Charles and Evelyn Montclair, side by side, yet separated by an invisible wall. And Signor Bellini, his elegant smile a mask that did not quite reach his eyes. Hercule Poirot took his place at the head of the room. He was immaculate, his dark suit impeccable, his mustaches gleaming, his eyes alight with the quiet triumph of the hunter who has cornered his prey. He placed his small, neat hands together as though in prayer. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began softly. At last the hour has come. Last night, in the gardens of this beautiful hotel, Madame Lefebvre was struck down with a dagger most curious, most distinctive. A crime committed not in passion, but in fear. And it is my duty to reveal to you the truth. A ripple of unease moved among the guests. Evelyn Montclair gave a soft gasp. Captain Ransom's eyes narrowed. Poirot raised a finger. We begin with the dagger. An antique, decorated with fleur-de-lis. This was no weapon snatched in haste. It was brought here deliberately. And who among us, I ask, traffics in such curiosities? Who deals in rare and questionable items? His gaze turned to Signor Bellini. The Italian's smile froze. Oui, monsieur, Poirot continued. The dagger belonged to you. You brought it here, concealed, as part of your illicit dealings. You believed it lost. But it was not you who wielded it, was it? Bellini raised his hands. Poirot, I swear. I may smuggle, I may barter, but murder, no. I did not kill her. Poirot's eyes twinkled. Just so. You're guilty of many things, Signor, but not of this crime. Still, the dagger, it was the instrument, yes, but not the answer. He turned sharply. Then we have Miss Whitfield. She left the ballroom many times, spoke secretly on the telephone. To whom? To a banker in Nice, who confirmed to me this morning that she was arranging an urgent transfer of funds. Why? Because she feared Madame Lefebvre would expose her employer, the Montclairs, for debts unpaid. But Miss Whitfield, though secretive, did not kill. She sought only to protect her position. Miss Whitfield bowed her head, silent, ashamed. Poirot paced the room slowly, like a conductor waiting for the crescendo. Captain Ransom, mon capitaine, you admired Madame Lefebvre, and she knew something of your past, that you lost not only comrades in the war, but also jewels entrusted to you for safekeeping. Yes, you quarreled, and you feared exposure. But you are a man of pride, not of stealth. No, Captain, you did not strike the blow. Ransom exhaled, his shoulders sagging. Poirot's little eyes glittered. And so, we come at last to the Montclairs. Evelyn, the sweet bride, dependent upon her husband. Charles, the charming young man with debts as high as the cliffs of Monte Carlo. Madame Lefebvre was willing to help, yes, but on one condition, that Charles cut his ties with Bellini's shadowy dealings. She sought to protect Evelyn from ruin, to prevent Charles from dragging her into disgrace. Charles leapt to his feet, his face flushed. That's a lie. She wanted to control us, to meddle. Poirot silenced him with a raised hand. Control, monsieur, or salvation? You feared exposure. You feared the loss of your wife's fortune, her faith in you, her very name. And so, when Madame Lefebvre walked in the gardens, you followed. You quarreled. And in your pocket, you carried the dagger, borrowed earlier from Signor Bellini in a pretense of admiration. In anger, in desperation, you struck. A silence fell. Evelyn Montclair gasped, clutching her husband's arm. Charles, no. Tell me it isn't true. Charles's face crumbled. I had no choice. She threatened me, said she would reveal everything to you, Evelyn. I couldn't lose you. I couldn't. Poirot's voice was stern yet tinged with sadness. Mon pauvre garçon. Murder, it solves nothing. It destroys only. Inspector Fournier stepped forward, his men moving swiftly. Charles Montclair, his shoulders bowed, was led away, his wife's sobs echoing through the salon. Poirot, alone once more at the center, smoothed his mustache and regarded the remaining guests. So you see, Amias Amos, the masquerade is ended. Each of you wore a mask, of love, of loyalty, of pride, of ambition. But in the end, it is always the same. Truth waits. And she is patient. He turned toward the windows, gazing out upon the moonlit sea. The waves lapped gently, indifferent, eternal. Poirot spoke softly, almost to himself. On the Riviera, where the sun shines and the roses bloom, the shadows are no less dark. And murder, murder hides everywhere, even in paradise. The room remained silent, each guest lost in thought, until Poirot added one final word, with a glance as sharp as the edge of the dagger that had begun it all. And remember, Miss Amos, the little gray cells, they see everything. If you enjoyed this journey with Hercule Poirot and the unmasking of a murderer beneath the Riviera moon, do not forget to like this video, subscribe for more mysteries in the style of Agatha Christie, and share it with fellow lovers of classic detective tales. The next case may be waiting just beyond the horizon.